Good evening, everyone. This is the Town of Stonington Mystic River Boathouse Park Implementation Committee regular meeting. Today is Monday, May 3rd, 2021. It's 6:00 p.m. Those present are myself, Sandy Tashir, recording secretary and moderator for the meeting. Mike O'Neill, Tim O'Brien, Mike Crowley, Nick Keppel, Tom Switz, Jim Kelly. Anybody join us since I started talking? Chris Gassiorek, sorry. Chad Frost, Debbie Downey, and Catherine Birchenow. This is a recorded meeting, and if you're going to speak, keep your microphones on mute if you're not speaking because it causes background noise.
Andy,
All right.
Brett Perkins is here.
Oh, Brett Perkins, there you are.
Steve
Brett
Planchon
Perkins.
also.
And Steve Planchon. All right. Brett Perkins, Steve Planchon. All right. Chairman Keppel, if you'd like to call the meeting to order, we're ready.
All right, thank you. I'll call the meeting to order and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation,
one nation,
under God,
God,
indivisible,
visible,
with
with liberty
and
and
justice
justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. But I think we have a quorum, so we don't have to seat any alternates. Are there any comments from the public? I don't think we have any public. We may have members of the public, but not the general public. We have Deb.
We do have an unidentified caller, but so they might be public, they might be somebody here. So I don't know.
So, any comments from the public? If there's any public out there? Hearing none, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes of the April meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes, Farouk.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
You have that, Sandy? Any discussion on the minutes? Any need for any revisions or comments? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes as presented of the April 5th meeting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. I don't think I didn't receive any correspondence, so I'm not aware of any correspondence. Sandy, did you get any correspondence? I'm not aware of any. So under old business, we can discuss the rowing center, the community rowing center update. As everyone knows, I think the clean up the remediation application, Brownsfield remediation application was filed, and we're
I got out of this meeting. I got lost. So
the minutes were approved.
by who, please?
I know my colleagues.
Farouk, I did the motion.
Farouk made the motion. Farouk Rajab made the motion, and Mike Crowley seconded it.
Oh, I didn't know Farouk had joined us. That's good to know. All right, I'm back. Hopefully everything will be good this time.
And I had asked that no correspondence that I'm aware of. You aware of any correspondence, Sandy?
No correspondence.
All right, so we're moving on to old business. We have the Brownsfield application pending. And I know Susan and Danielle and I guess Deb too, but are also talking with the federal government about a another grant opportunity, but it's still in the early stages. I don't know whether anyone has anything else to comment on or report about the rowing center or the park. Anybody can feel free to chime in with any news that they have.
If I could just quickly on the rowing center, we have resumed meeting, putting together a plan for starting fundraising again. We did have a very successful pancake breakfast yesterday, large turnout, a lot of people asking about the boathouse and the next step forward. So we're back kind of in full swing, moving forward again on our side.
And how is the season going? Quick update on the season, Mike?
Early, but boys are showing very well. Girls are kind of struggling a little bit, but it's still just a couple races under our belt. So, but turnout's kind of light on most other programs, including ours. I just think with COVID and everything, it's hard to get all the kids to show up for team sports right now. But so far so good. The boys have won a couple of events, and the girls have been close. So.
For those who have not seen it, I would commend to folks the video that someone put together that John Thornell distributed. I think he sent it to everybody in the Boathouse committee, but of Mr. Hammond single sculling on the river, Mr. River, and I think it's as I don't know. I think it's a delightful preview of what scullers and rowers could be experiencing. So if you haven't taken a look, it's very well done, and I think creates an alluring impression of what the future holds. I don't know whether Susan isn't joining us, right? But Deb, do you
No,
anything from the selectmen or the town that you wish to provide in the way of an update on anything at your end of the?
Excuse me, Nick, it looks like we lost Sandy again.
it looks like maybe she'll come back on, but. So somebody will have to update her then with any minutes. In terms of the town, you're correct. Susan isn't here. We're kind of in between on the grants. We are working, on another grant from the federal government. We're still waiting to hear from the state. Danielle is, starting to get back into looking into parking issues, but that's pretty much all I've got for an update.
All right. And before we move on to new business, any questions about any items of old business? We probably should not lose sight of the fact that I think we're still in search of a name for the park. So the Boathouse has a named is a named entity for Hart Perry, but no name of the park yet, and we know that the folks from the fire district are concerned about there may be some people who are new enough to the committee that they don't realize, probably going back 2 years or so ago, the fire district expressed concern about the term Mystic River Boathouse Park creating confusion with the park off of Cottrell Street, which I guess may be known as the Mystic River Park. And so they were concerned that people would be, they would just create confusion among the public, especially the visiting public. So just want to make sure we keep that as something in the back of our minds. Any items of new business that anybody wants to raise?
Nick, it's
Sure,
Tom
Tom.
Switz. I have one question. As far as the naming goes, I know the boathouse has been named, but it seems to me that maybe the fundraising hasn't gone as well as we had hoped. And is there any thought or talk about maybe doing a naming for somebody local who might be able to put up $1 million or $2 or something like that, similar to what the YMCA did?
Well, I guess since the community boathouse folks have taken on the task of coming up with the necessary funds, my personal view is we have to be deferential to them since they're on the hook to raise the money for the boathouse. I think we have to take our cue from them about what strategies employed to raise the necessary funds. But I don't know.
Okay, thank you, Nick.
Yeah, and Nick, if I could add that, the only thing I would say is, in the current plan that the town has, they've pretty much deleted that whole dock structure from the funding that they've requested from the state. So it may be worthwhile for the town to think about how they might raise the funds for that piece.
There's some really bad interference. I don't know what's going on with the audio.
Please mute if you haven't yet. I don't. That sort of, in my experience, those sounds happen when someone calls in as well as it doesn't use the computer audio.
Yeah, and Sandy's listed twice, so it may be her having feedback. She's listed as host and co-host.
Yes, I am having issues tonight. There's something going on with it freezing up and like kicking me out. So it's being recorded, so I will be able to do the minutes. I'm just trying to figure out why I'm here twice.
I would maybe Sandy jump out both times and try to come back in again.
And Mike,
She has to make somebody the host before she jumps out, or else we lose the meeting.
Last time it kicked out, it went to me as the presenter for some reason.
probably something to do, Steve, with you being the smartest person in the meeting.
Yeah, I don't know about that. All I know is I do WebEx 3 or 4 times a day, so I'm kind of used to it.
Mike, can you go back to what you finished with? I don't think a lot of us could hear the end of your remarks.
Yeah, so,
Just the squealing.
yeah, so Nick, basically, in the current plan, and Debbie, chime in if I'm incorrect, but I believe they took the dock structure out of the request for the money from the state. And that's a pretty significant piece that I think we'd all like to obviously see in the park. So that might be one thing that the town needs to think about, if, they wanted to do their own fundraising or their own ask, that would be a very likely thing to try and get someone to put some money towards, because it's a pretty prominent structure and you might find someone to be interested in putting their name on it. So
Yeah,
again,
we took the crew docks out. We left in one dock and the boat ramp, but you're correct. We did take
The
the
wharf,
docks.
the
Yes,
boardwalk.
the wharf out. Yes.
So again, I don't know. I mean, we're fundraising for the boathouse and we're fundraising for kind of our docks and the house, but I don't think we have any plans at this point to fundraise for that wharf structure. So to Tommy's point, if the town were interested in doing something like that, that would be probably the thing that I would try and put my arms around.
All right. Any new business?
Yeah, Nick, I was wondering, would it make sense at this point to start putting together a kind of a plan or a schedule towards the permitting, which is really the next step here. Assuming things go well at the state, we get our go ahead from the state on the funds. The very next step we'll go into is a permitting phase. And to Chad's presentations now a couple times, some of those permits are pretty long lead time. So it might make sense to categorize them, figure out which ones are the longest lead times, put together a plan, as to how we could attack some of those. The town does have some money right now. We could start, that process. I believe, and Chad, again, chirp in, it's the waterfront stuff that's the longest lead time. But it would be nice just to have kind of a schedule and a plan of action towards moving that stuff forward, assuming that we are successful with the state. And obviously, if we're not, we at least have the plan. So I don't know that it's a waste of time, but it seems to me it wouldn't, it'd be nice not to be flat-footed, once we get the fund to start the next process.
Makes sense to me. Deb, do you have any sense of whether will it be staff support for by either Keith or Susan or Public Works on the permitting effort?
My thought is, certainly Susan will do some oversight, but I don't believe so. I believe that's going to be part of the next contract we have. I don't think staff's going to do all of it. They may do some, but certainly not all of it. They just don't have the time or enough people to do all that.
Okay.
We should look and see what we have. I recall that there was, at least a rough outline of what needed to be done, and see what we can. I mean, I remember, Chad, you put that together for us, and kind of look at that and see what the next steps might be. And we can ask Susan and Keith about at least getting started, but I'm not going to commit them to do the work.
Yeah, I would just answer that. There's a lot of technical drawings, technical write-up, all the remediation approvals need to be done, all the coastal approvals and the site plan and everything local. So there was a long list. I do think it would make more sense, as much sense as we can, whatever we can afford to do as much of it in unison, because it's all gonna affect the next permit. So it might be something that maybe, Debbie, between you, me, and Susan, we can chat about it or something and figure out, look at the whole list, figure out if there's a way we can go at some of it or part of it, or what's the highest priority, and figure out what the path forward might be.
Yeah, because I think that the challenge, the planning / permitting challenge is going to be that some permits are going to be required for the remediation, for the brownfield remediation, but it's not, the remediation project isn't going to be, isn't going to cover, I don't think, Chad, right? All of the permits that are required, a meaningful chunk of them, but we could run into a situation where if we are only focusing on the permits that are associated with remediation, there are other park-related and boathouse-related, permits that are independent of that, and for which I don't think there's money in the remediation application. So, one of the issues when you say in the next contract, we have to sort out what will be covered permitting wise from the remediation, and then what remains, and how do we pursue that?
And it may be that the town staff may be able to get started on certain permits associated, for example, with demolition or moving the house. Those wouldn't necessarily be associated with the remediation. And they'll be some of the first things that will need to be done.
Yeah, we should look at it all, because there are a bunch of permits that will, whatever we do remediation wise is going to affect whatever we do coastal permit wise, right? With fill and placement and edge restraint and, whatever we're doing to conceal it on the edge. I agree that normally a demolition or, demolition of the one shed and move of the house, but the move of the house is really close to where the VOC spill is and where the hydrocarbon spill is. And so we would just want to look at that and make sure that we don't have to have the hydrocarbon cleanup done before we can put in the foundation for the house. And just, I think it makes sense to look, maybe, again, look at the whole thing and figure out what's the path forward. And if we can break it down into little pieces, all the better.
Excuse me, this is Greg Perkins. Do we have a siting document that locates the new foundation for the house at this juncture? Is it accurate enough to be able to overlay that onto the remediation plan?
I'll say yes and no. We have a plan that's based on an A2 survey, and we have all of the remediation identification areas on that A2 survey. What is yet to be fully defined really is the house, and it's, yes, we've identified where it is, but it can definitely move a little bit depending on, the needs of the real boathouse. As the boathouse gets really defined and designed, it's probably going to shift a little bit, and that could shift the house slightly, or whatever the connection is between the house and the boathouse. So those all will have an effect on it. So yes, we have a plan. I would expect that there will be some modifications to that plan as all those designs get further refined. And likewise, as we find, if we're doing cleanup out there, we might find something that makes us move it, even after we think we have it nailed down. So we're close, but we definitely don't have the final yet.
But we still need to engineer a foundation, so that hasn't even been done, nor do we know what the bearing capacity of the soil is underneath the proposed area for the new foundation. So we have a bit of work to do before we can do much of anything.
Correct. What we have right now is a concept plan. We need to do design development. We need to do construction drawings, permitting, and specifications.
Hey, Nick. Mike Crowley. Hey,
Yes, Mike.
I think your plan, you got to know overall now what you have to do. But I still think one of the first things we got to do, and Debbie would get involved with this, is to get that site cleaned up. Once you got that cleaned up, then you're ready to go. But I don't know why we're not cleaning that area up. Debbie, could you answer that?
Sure, this is Debbie. we're waiting on the remediation grant before we can start the cleanup because a lot of it is tied together, moving the house, cleaning up the soil, doing a cap. And the state changed some of the regulations in February, which actually may help us because there are some new options and we may not need to necessarily excavate those hydrocarbons. We may be able to just have them under a land use restriction or the cap. But there's, we're kind of limited on getting started without the money from the grant. Because I don't know if that answered your question, Mike.
Yeah, well, you gotta, at some point, we gotta have a plan, which was my opinion last meeting, is we gotta put the whole thing together now. Danielle's working on the parking, which is a real big item.
Yes.
And then all these little ones we gotta put together as to what we have to do. Hey, Debbie, could I ask you another question? That
Sure.
grant you're looking at from the federal government, how much is that worth?
I believe it's under $100,000 and it's associated with the one that I had looked at is really the living shoreline and more of the coastal work. But I don't remember the exact amount.
Yeah, well, it all helps.
Every bit helps.
It sounds to me like we gotta put a plan together.
Yeah, maybe we can have I'll take volunteers for like a permitting subcommittee or subgroup, a little working group, focusing on the permits. So if anyone's interested in helping, you can just email me and we'll try to pull together some folks to work on that.
Nick, Mike,
So-
can I ask you one question? Nick,
Sure.
you know any good
Go ahead.
lawyers?
No, I haven't ever met anybody that falls in that.
Oh.
Why?
So Nick, this is Breck. I would be willing to put together a Microsoft project, overall project schedule for this job. To, to schedule all the permits, but I'm gonna need to get obviously some durations and predecessors from, some of the very talented folks that are on this team to be able to generate that schedule. Because they're all linked to one another and they without one, you can't get the other. And so it's a series of dominoes that have to fall in the right direction. So I'll be willing to put this together, but I need some technical advice from from the greater group with regards to the schedule. So there is another bit of it is then the philosophy between how the town's work has to be done in relationship to the Boathouse's work. So, and understanding that because that's a big seam that's got to get stitched together also. So.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Breck. Any other new business before we move on to comments from the public? Hearing none.
Jim Kelly, I'm wondering, do we know when the award will be granted or not granted with the
Deb, you recall,
Yes.
I think it's end of May, June timeframe is when, isn't
Well,
in that ballpark?
We'll find out in May if we've been kind of shortlisted and then there'll be interviews and the award should be kind of end of June with hopefully the money coming shortly after that.
Thank you.
Debbie, this is Breck. What is the percentage if you get shortlisted? What do you think your odds are at that point?
Unfortunately, I don't know. I can't answer that. This one's so different because it's less money than they've had in the past. So I don't know the answer. We're keeping our fingers crossed. We're being hopeful.
Any comments from the public? Hearing none, any comments or questions from the committee?
Hi, Nick, Steve Planchon. I just wanted to go back to what Chad said about the getting together with Debbie and folks for the permitting. Are we gonna move forward with that, or is that still in discussion? How are we gonna move forward with that so we can see where those dominoes have to fall for permitting wise, so we can keep going forward?
Well, the reason I suggested a subgroup is I think it's a little cumbersome for this entire committee to grapple with that. So I thought that if we could identify some folks that were willing to specifically work on that, and Breck volunteered. You know, I want to be careful about not you know, Chad's been kind enough to continue to share some expertise, but you know, I don't know that it's reasonable or fair to him to task him with too much at this point. But I was hoping that between anyone who's interested from the committee and Deb and Keith and Susan, that we can at least start, you know, drawing up something of a schedule or and you know, because obviously we all know that, you know, there's a bunch of moving parts to this, and they are related, but they also have, you know, some independent drivers. So it's kind of complicated. It's and clearly we have to try to lend as much cohesion as is possible under the circumstances, because at this point we don't know how much money we're getting, or if we're getting any from the remediation. We don't know what resources will be additionally available from wherever for the rest of the project.
Okay, I understand what you're saying.
I mean, I'm happy to start and touch base with Susan and Keith and see if there's something we have already that we can at least get a rough idea, you know, based on the information Chad and the other contractors have provided in the past.
Deb, if there's anything that I can do to help, please call on me, Jim Kelly.
Okay, thank you.
Debbie, it's Breck. There is a comprehensive list that was produced about 2 years ago that had some sequential issues with regards to the permitting process that Chad had put together. So we have, you know, in some binder. So I mean, I would have to dig it out of my files, but it does exist. So
Okay, that would be great if somebody could find that. That way we have a starting point and we can at least touch base, and then that would be something for a subcommittee to start, you know, working on as well.
Yeah, and I guess a topic for maybe another day when we have a better sense of what monies are coming from the brownfields funds, but you know, it's clear that even if we get the full amount we asked for the brownfields, there's currently not enough available to do the plan that this committee approved, you know, a year and a half or thereabouts. So, you know, one of the things that will have to be determined is what's going to be the approach of the you know, pursuit of the plan that was approved. It was approved in concept, but, you know, with funding still being to be determined. And so, are we going to take, you know, what approach is going to be taken? Are we going to, you know, seek permits with the expectation that the funding will be there, or are we going to wait till funding can be secured and then go get the permits? So, it's sometimes our enthusiasm may get a little bit ahead of our wherewithal. So,
It's Breck again. I'm wondering, Chad, do you know if we could do a post amended filing if for some reason we don't reach our total capacity for capital?
I don't
As
know what-
far as the permitting goes, you mean?
Yeah,
Right.
so say we go for the full bore on the original permit, right? And then we don't, obviously the estimates come back in and we're shy. And then we could go back and do a post amended filing on the permit set and then, just reduce the maybe the cobbles or whatever we need to do to pull it back into budget. Is that possible?
I would say with certain things, yes. With like finishes and like you mentioned cobbles. So yes, if we swapped cobbles out for, concrete, that really doesn't change too much. The real permitting, like the coastal remediation stuff, how, once we commit to how we're going to stabilize the shoreline, and we have a permit for that, we're going to need to be able to implement the majority of whatever it is we got permitted. And anything that becomes a substantial change requires us to go back and change those permits. So, I think we should have a serious discussion about what it is all those things are to make sure that they are in the budget and it's what the town wants. And then that's what we go after permitting for. Yes, we've always said there's ways of getting back, doing value engineering and getting back into budget. But on I would say specifically the coastal stuff as well as the remediation stuff, kind of once we get the blessing and once we have the directive of this is how we're going to solve the problem, then we don't have a huge amount of latitude there. We can change materials out for some of the aesthetic stuff, but that's not really held up in permitting. And then it's site plan, it's local approvals, and those we can probably get some modifications to if we need to after the fact. But I would say the big one is kind of, in my mind, is the pier, around the point that was in the master plan. Obviously, it's out of the funding request at this point from a remediation standpoint. From a coastal permitting perspective, it makes a lot of sense to get permitted in addition with the living shoreline because we know the state is going to push back on the permitting of that structure. And you'll have a much better success rate of getting it permitted if you can show that demonstrate you're doing something really good for the environment, like the living shoreline. If you're never going to fund, the boardwalk, and we just want to take it off the project, that's also fine. It saves some permitting headaches, right? We don't include it, and it allows the living shoreline to shine a little bit easier and not kind of take some of the heat off of us for the boardwalk. So those are the discussions I think we should have as to what amenities are in. If you're never going to do the living shoreline, right, then we shouldn't permit the living shoreline. I think everybody wants to. I'm just throwing out kind of big, broad topics that those are what are going to matter more than the finished material of the pavement.
So Nick, it sounds like we can do a post amended filing if we don't come up with enough capital to do the job. There's the core issue is that we have, once we commit to the living shoreline, which I don't think is a heavy lift, and I think we've anticipated that we've got that in, then if we need to pull the boardwalk or change the landscape types, that's not a big issue.
I think the other thing we got to look at is just the whole dock permitting, and again, that's another one of the long lead time issues. And it's dock permitting with the pier, without the pier. Do we try and get a permit for the pier when we're doing the docks, even though it might not get built right away, or do we want to, do a two-phase dock program where we initially do just the small dock and the rowing dock, and then come back at a later date and try and do the pier. So that's the other kind of big consideration we should probably be looking at.
All right. Well, any other comments from the committee? My only comment is that I think as we start developing the permitting schedule, it can also be a framework for making some of the decisions that that Chad just outlined and that you commented on, Mike, because, there'll be a bunch of decision points of, that, and we have to say, which are we gonna go for the gusto, or are we gonna be, be more conservative in our approach? So, and obviously, we had one serious, year and a half delay with SHPO, and then we had the pandemic. So the last, 2.5 years have been very unusual for the orderly playing out of our goals here and our plan. So I think the reality is we're still sorting out what the consequences are going to be of the world post-pandemic, and so anyway, I just think it's important that there's been some serious time has gone by, but we've had to deal with some unanticipated, truly extraordinary events. A totally different reaction from the state than was the original reaction that Rob and others got from the ECD, and then for good measure, the world shut down for the better part of a year. So we'll do our best to pull the process together and move forward on as the town, as our group and town leaders and staff and the community at large think is appropriate. Anything else for the?
Mike, it's Breck again. I'm sorry to take another swap at this, but I think as you're talking about what you just spoke about, we have to manage expectations that are going to occur once we're announced, or we're lucky enough to get this grant. There's going to be an expectation that the wheels are going to start rolling. We're going to break the ground. We're going to start the job. There is a bunch of paperwork that has to be done, permitting and all this other bit, that is going to take a while, right? And so we need to message this out to the general public in a way so that these expectations that are building for this grant are managed in an appropriate way, and people don't have like, oh no, they're flat on their back again. So because we're not going to be able to go, front loaders aren't going to show up the day we get the grant.
Fair point, Breck. Any other comments from the committee?
Yeah, it's Steve again. I was just going through my emails trying to find that PowerPoint that listed all of the permits. I don't know if that went out to the committee or if that was one of Chad's documents. But Chad, is that something you have that you can send over?
Easily, yeah. It's part of the presentation, and I think I have it out as an individual document as well. So I can send it around in the morning.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yep.
Steve, you're just being modest. I know you have it memorized.
Yeah, I can see it in my head up on the screen, but that's about it.
Well, that's progress.
I just
All right.
remember 36 permits. That's what I keep remembering,
Yeah,
or
it was like-
22, or whatever it
it was like-
was. It was a huge number.
Yeah, he ran out of bullet points.
Yeah. All right, last call. Any other comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll second it.
Motion made by Mike Crowley and seconded by Mike O'Neill. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Right, motion carried. Thank you all for participating, and see you next month. And anybody wants to work on the permitting subgroup, let me know.
All right.
Thanks so
Thank you,
much.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
Good night.